Welcome to our UCLA Extension Department of Business and Management and Legal Programs video lecture series on entrepreneurship, new venture formation, and strategic business plan development. The video you are about to watch is an introduction to how to develop a price strategy. I'm Harry Redinger, your instructor. There's a total of over 40 videos in this lecture series that integrates with our UCLA Extension online course management program Canvas. Each video strives to be brief and will have a bit of overlap with each other to tie our curriculum together. Okay, let's get started. So before we get into the subject matter of developing our price strategy, I just want to reflect a little bit on how important it is to know your customer, to know the market, and know the price. Because it's amazing how just being off just a few bucks, just a little bit, can make all the difference in the world in terms of acquiring customers, your startup clients and customers. So many are so price sensitive, and especially with the ability to acquire goods and services online. The growth of the internet has empowered the consumer to reach very far to find a price that's just right for them. So sometimes, we have to differentiate ourselves with our market niche strategy, so that if our price is higher than the market equilibrium, that the consumer, client, customer sees the value in paying that higher price. Price has also much to do with experience. And how you come up with price is just key. And this section of the business plan, or this category of knowledge for someone who's mastering the profession, the art of entrepreneurship, is just absolutely essential to know how to come up with price for the products and services that you're selling to your target customer. Our first slide here is a ball diagram, and I guess the reason why I like this in terms of the way it demonstrates and categorizes all of the 6 types of strategies that make up our overall competitive strategy is because it's a circle, and it's divided down the center with our management strategy on one side and our market strategy on the other, is the importance of just knowing that what we do on the inside has to be in balance with what's going on the outside. And this particularly holds true with our price strategy. Because, the markets change. Prices can change hourly, weekly, daily, weekly. So we have to really be aware of how price is established and comes about in our industry, in your industry. So, and knowing how to adjust that price appropriately relevant to market demand could be absolutely, life and death essential knowledge of how to monitor and make those changes as an entrepreneur. When we talk about price, the first person that comes to mind is Adam Smith. He's the one who came up with the supply and demand model and the whole concept behind market equilibrium price. But we can diagram this as a graphically, but we also just have to intrinsically kind of know what's going on. It's kind of a feel in terms of what's the demand and who's out there supplying it, and what are people willing to pay for it. Because our goal as an entrepreneur is to maximize our profitability in the marketplace. We never want to undersell ourselves, undercut ourselves. We want to present a fair market price. and be within this bubble called the market equilibrium price. Because if we're providing our goods and services at a price lower than what we can survive at, it's just a matter of tick, 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 tick until we're belly up and we're a failure. So we want to understand very well how the supply and demand model works. So the fundamental objective of your market price strategy is to make a profit within the market equilibrium price zone while maintaining a price point that aligns with your mission statement, the mission statement of your organization. And so price is versus demand. There's a relationship, because as price goes up, it doesn't mean that you won't find somebody who will pay the price, but you might have a smaller target market that's in a position to pay that price. So this is why when we develop our mission statement, we want to clearly establish who we're selling to, because that has a lot to do with their ability to afford the price point we're at. And are we providing products, goods, and services that are of that quality for that price point? So what I like about this diagram, that you have, if you look in the middle there, it shows market value right in the center, and then 10% above, you have 30% of the market, 15% above, 10% of the market. If we have 10% below, you've got 70% of the market and 15% in terms of value below 90% of the market in terms of available market. So, when you're new to a market, much has to go into the finding the price comfort zone for your target customer that allows you to have the maximum number of target customers for the price you're asking. So, when we start a business, we often want to do a number of test market rollouts of our goods and services, and also be ready to interview and have conversations with your first customers and clients as to their feelings about price. Always know that people buy you first and what you're selling second. And so your presentation skills, your emotional intelligence, your ability to connect and portray an aura of understanding of your customers' needs and fears is also a key. Those psychological issues are also a key aspect of price, because sometimes the value is all about you and your presentation, more so than the goods and services that you might be providing. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, relevant to where the value of price comes from. Let's take some time and talk about the infrastructure, the logic behind a supply and demand model. It's essential that you understand the supply and demand model in the short and long run. And a little sidebar note, you will be asked on the final exam, for those of you who are in our course right now, to diagram a supply and demand model in both the short run and long run. And so here is a supply and demand model in both the short run and long run, where demand shifts to the right, creating a higher value of P2 or price, the P2, and then how supply shifts to the right, and then pushing the price back down to the original P1 price. And we're going to go step by step through to explain this. So and now bear in mind, this is like, it looks like calculus or math and geometry and things of that sort. But in real life, we have to be aware of the concepts going on here, because this is exactly what goes on. So first off, here we have the demand curve. So notice that the vertical bar is the dollar amount that we're selling units for, and then the bottom horizontal bar of this graph is our units of output. So if we have, in this case, it looks like 1.5 units output, there's a very high price to make that just that one knockoff unit. So let's say we're making a laptop computer or something. We're just going to make one as a rapid prototype version of what we want to mass produce. Well, it's going to cost a lot of money to make that one unit because it's just a one-off. There's no what we refer to as economies of scale. There's not an assembly line cranking these things out. We're making just one, and so it's art basically. It sells at a very high price, and so as we increase the production of what we're selling, the price falls because now we have an assembly line of materials and labor coming in that's mass production, and the price to produce falls down, and then we have the supply curve that says as we produce more, we're going to have to hire marketing people, and we're going to have a factory, and we're going to have overhead and administrative functions and insurance and all the stuff it takes to run a business. So now as the units of output increase, the money we've got to spend to supply these goods and services to the marketplace increase. And then when we overlap both the supply curve with the demand curve is where we find our market equilibrium price. Kind of magical. But in essence, this is how all markets work. And all markets have some form of market equilibrium price where if you start to produce way above it, consumers will go, I'm not going to pay that much money for this. I can go hire, your competitor over there and pay much less and get just as good of a product and services. And then if you charge less than it, then from a supply side, it's just almost impossible for you to hire all the infrastructure and accountants and staff and management to do what you do. And eventually you will choke to death. You'll run out of money trying to finance things, and you're not making a healthy profit. And so when the demand curve shifts to the right, now all of a sudden, and the supply curve stays static. And this gets also back into the book, Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point. When we can do something that creates a demand by just tweaking something a little bit, and our competitor doesn't figure that out. We go, aha, we see a need, and the competitor doesn't see that. Now we can charge a higher price because no one else is providing it. So we're in a real sweet spot in the market where we can charge a higher price, in this case P2, and because there's this increased demand, but there's not the supply. So by definition, a market opportunity is where there's more demand than there is supply. There it is. And this is where we can charge a higher amount. But then and again, in this case, I've got the Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point book up here to really drive home that point of being able to identify a small change that it creates an increased level of demand for a particular product or service. And that's P2. So we're kind of blowing that up. Next is in due time, our competitors are going to go, me too. We want to be a part of this too. And depending on if you have patents or trademarks or things like that, if you're not able to raise barriers of entry, guess what? Now you've got competitors, and the competitors are coming in, and through competition, they're going to drive that price back down to the original P1 is at the same level as P3. And this is what we call the supply and demand model in both the short and the long run. And where we want to be as entrepreneurs is go, aha, I see a need, and position our company to be in a short-run position to be able to charge a maximum amount of market price for our goods and the goods and services that we're presenting to the marketplace. There's another concept that I want you to be aware of. Is And we call this the elasticity of price, and this deals with the level of demand that someone has for the goods and services you're offering. So, and we often refer to that as marginal utility. And that's how much somebody's willing to pay for something based on their needs. And so this graphic here kind of really drives that point home. You know, the first character on the left has an empty stomach, and it says below, you know, a high marginal benefit, very thirsty, starving to death. I mean, so if you're in the middle of the desert with no water, what are you willing to pay for a gallon of water if I show up in the desert? And the answer is anything. You're going to die. You're so of thirst. So, you know, so this example in terms of a drink is how thirsty are you? And so the image in the center shows a stomach that's half full. And now we have a moderate thirst, or a moderate marginal benefit that comes from the drink. Do we really need it? Well, kind of yes, but kind of no. You know, so depending on what you're charging, you might need to lower the price. So the person says, well, at that price, I'll buy it anyway, even though I'm not really thirsty, but I'll buy it. And then the character on the right here, the stomach is 100% full, he's not thirsty, and would have a very low marginal benefit for the drink. And in case if you're really full, you might even pay not to have to drink it. So we want to be aware. This is a good, example here of showing physical pain, or thirst, or hunger associated with price. And so when we go into the marketplace and we got something that, how bad does our customer want what we're selling? How much are they salivating over it? Because no one's going to buy something they don't need. They got to be in some kind of pain, to see the solution. They got to be convinced that what you're providing is an absolute solution to their problem. Because so much of what we do as entrepreneurs is solve the problems of other people at a fair market price, at a market equilibrium price of some sort. So then the next slide here deals with more specifically, and this is what we call a marginal utility curve. And this stuff gets into calculus and things of this sort, which you don't have to know anything about. But this is just saying that there's an optimum price out there where for the target market customer, that you'll get the right price for their level of thirst, if you will, and so after and this deals with so if we have a price that's too high, they won't see value in it, and it's at the right price at the right point where we'll have maximum demand for our goods and services. Sometimes we can also look at the marginal utility and performance output from in terms of the diagram on the right, in terms of degrees of stress, and so the more stress we have, the more we're willing to pay to solve that problem, and then as that number goes back, then our demand goes down because the price is going up. So we call this a marginal utility curve, and it has a lot to do with what we sometimes refer to as the elasticity of price. And this gets back to the diagram also of the individual. It's got that's very thirsty, and if you're very thirsty, you're more interested in at a price that's the peak of this curve, and the more you're satisfied, then it goes down from there. Let's talk about the types of price strategy. And so we have outlined here 6 types of price strategy: high price, low volume; low price, high volume; negotiated price; competitive bid price; cost plus profit margin price; fixed price. So these are basic types of price strategy that, and every industry is different. And no doubt, one of these types of high price, low volume, or low price, high volume, etc., is going to be unique to your industry. And the type of price strategy that you go with also in some kind of way is going to be reflected in the mission statement of your business. So the mission statement market niche strategy has got to be in balance and sync with your price strategy. That's just, dumb logic. And so you have to understand how is price determined in your industry, because those are the parameters that you're going to have to compete within. So you kind of want to know who's the price maker and who's the price taker. And so that's a good question. We always want to be aware of that, especially if it's a negotiated price. And there's a lot of competition out there, then you, the consumer, is the price maker. If there's not a lot of competition, then the provider is the price maker. So here we have price times goods sold has to be in balance with our break-even point plus our profit margin. So if we take the number of units that we're selling times the price we're selling at, that's going to be a dollar amount. Okay, that's just dumb logic. If what we sell, the number of units times the price. But we also have to have what is the cost to produce this on the supply side, in terms of direct cost of sales plus a profit margin. That is another price point, if you will, that necessary to survive. So how much does it cost to run our business plus a profit margin? And that's got to be equal to whatever it is we're selling times unit price. And there's a constant tug of war, because if we're not selling enough units at the right price, then we're not going to be able to pay for our direct cost of sales plus our profit margin necessary to survive as a business. So understanding what's going on with these scales of balance is absolutely essential, because when we go into business, we have to know for sure that there's going to be enough demand that we can survive at what we're selling at the price point. And if not, we might have to raise our price to where we can survive, but we can only raise that price within the parameters of the market equilibrium price. Or we have to do something to add more value to it, or lower the price and increase the numbers of units sold, or something along that. But understanding the need to be in balance with the total number of units sold, the price per unit sold, and our direct cost of sales plus a break-even point is a fundamental aspect of coming up with price. So another way we can look at this is price has to be in balance with our mission statement of what we're selling, to whom we're selling, what makes us competitively different. There's another diagram up here, and this is important because this will be on the final exam, by the way, little forewarning. We're going to ask on the final exam, diagram a profit maximization model and indicate where you're going to find make the most profit, because the reason why this is important is that it's important that you know that selling more doesn't mean you're making more. And so let's explain the structure of this diagram. Just like the supply and demand curve, we have price per unit on vertically, and then we have units sold horizontally at the bottom. And then if we go up to, I guess, this is 2 units of dollars, it symbolizes our fixed costs in terms of rent, insurances, and things like that. Fixed costs, and what we refer to as overhead. And then taking off from there is the revenue we receive from anything we sell. direct cost of sales. So every time we sell something, we have to pay for labor and materials and things like that. So there is a variable cost associated with our production. So our fixed costs plus our variable cost equals our total cost. And then every time we sell something, we have revenue coming in, and revenue has a growth curve to it. And so profit is defined as revenue minus direct cost of sales minus, which could be said as variable cost, but direct cost of sales minus overhead. And the difference between those two is called profit. And the reason why it's important to understand this is that every business has a sweet spot in terms of output for maximum revenue. And you can find this for your business by looking up the SIC code and then looking at the average number of employees, the average revenue, the average overhead and things like that for businesses in your industry. So it's real easy to find this information out working with like Dun & Bradstreet or Standard & Poor's. And so this is called the profit maximization model, and it basically says that for every business and every industry, there is a sweet spot where you're going to maximize your profit. And if you produce more than that sweet spot, you're actually making less profit, or less than that sweet spot, you're making less profit. So we want to, always know and shoot for that sweet spot. And if business keeps growing past it, then we want to raise the question, maybe we open another division or another unit to produce or provide our goods and services. Our next slide deals with break-even point. And my gosh, if there's ever kind of just like an intuitive kind of thing that you as an entrepreneur always know is where's your break-even point. And if you're below your break-even point, you'll also need to know how much financial reserves you have to have in place to make payroll, rent, insurances, and things like that to survive economic downturns, to survive a rainy day. And so this all kind of is, every business has a magic number a nut that has to be cracked, sometimes people say. But, to get past that break-even point per the number of employees you have and investments and or the cost of just surviving in business overhead on a daily, weekly, quarterly, annual, monthly basis. Every month there's a break-even point that we have to surpass to survive, and hopefully it has and you can see by the profit margin here, your desired minimum percent profit that you like to make every month too as a business. This leads us to the introduction to our value proposition ladder. And our value proposition ladder is how we're going to, from a value standpoint, create a relationship with a potential customer at the lowest possible dollar amount. How can we get them in we soon are going to introduce you our funnel, our sales funnel. And then how we're going to step them up from something free to something we're charging very little for, and then at the same time we're creating a relationship, and eventually step them up to our ultimate goal to have them buy a car or a machine or engage us with our highest and most valuable level of services, and step them up this value proposition ladder. Every business, every entrepreneur has to have some form of value proposition ladder. If you don't, it could almost mean the kiss of death. What is the most comfortable way to introduce somebody to your organization, your business, your mission statement, and step them up this ladder to the point where they're a full-fledged customer? This next slide is we call it the sales process funnel. So the first part up here it shows an introduction, and then awareness, research, word of mouth, purchase point, and then conversion. And see the target at the bottom? That's symbolic of the target customer. How are we going to bring someone in to actually convert them into an ongoing customer? That, the last slide had specific objectives. Those are really irrelevant because these steps are unique to you. So they even have templates, and in your business plan, in your mind, in your market development strategy, it's essential that you develop some form of market sales process funnel. And we could also call this the propositional ladder. How are you going to step somebody further and further into this funnel to be converted into becoming a target customer at the bottom? So kind of keep this in mind. This is an essential part of your price strategy, and that's how to bring someone in and work them up to the point where they become a fully vested customer of your company. From a serendipity standpoint, I just want to, and I'll be repeating myself a little bit, but I want to step through these market sales strategy talking points. And I just want to, throw this out because, every business is different and there's different things that affect their price. And so I want to go over these real quickly just because they might jar an aha moment for you. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 talking points here. The first is just finding balance between your market niche price, your market niche and your price. So your mission statement or your market niche strategy and your price strategy have to be in balance with each other. If one's higher or lower, people they're just not going to see the value. You're not going to get the clients. The next is the types of market pricing strategy. So as we indicated earlier, there's many types: high volume, low price, low volume, high price, competitive bid, price lists. There's strategy. There's many different strategies associated with price, and every industry has pricing strategies that are unique to that industry, and you have to master those. Next is price determinants, and these can be like benchmarks in terms of break-even point, minimum profit margins. And by the way, much of this kind of stuff you can get through market research companies like Dun & Bradstreet and Standard & Poor's that will give you standard ratios relevant to price and financial ratios that you want to function within to be a healthy business in your industry. The next talking point here is commission versus payroll type businesses. Businesses that are on commission usually don't have payroll. And then therefore, and commission is usually some form of negotiated or competitive bid type price system. And companies that have payroll usually have fee schedules, standard pricing models. It's not negotiated. So whenever we're dealing with a negotiated type of price, we often find staff is paid by commission. Whenever we have standard pricing structure, we now see payrolls. So just kind of be aware that's a talking point relevant to price. The next up here is determining your price from both the sales of the equation, both sides of the equation. What I mean by that is the unit times the price. And balance with the break-even point plus a profit margin. And just kind of being aware of this equation, one being units times price and break-even times profit plus profit margin, and them having some kind of balance with them. Cost sheets. So some industries, such as the apparel industry, everything is broken down to a price sheet plus a profit margin, and it gets, incredibly competitive. But just know that there's a whole world of cost sheets that are associated with coming up with price and the bidding process. We can also use cost sheets as like in construction, a construction cost estimate. In a way, that's costing. What's it going to cost them plus our standard overhead, and that's what we'll bid the job at. That's our pricing strategy. Next is coordinating price with product cycles. So, when a price first comes out, product comes out in the short run, everyone wants it, high price. So the longer it's on the market, the price starts to fall, and at some point, you can't give it away. So, products have product cycles, and with that product cycle also is a pricing cycle. Adjusting price with economic cycles. So, if the economy is down, well, your prices might want to fall. If the economy is up, you might want to have higher prices. So just be aware that your price wants to be in sync and associated with the health of the economy. And then also documenting your price strategy. How are you going to? Because sometimes it just, so our price is this, but and it's kind of hard to, from an instructional standpoint, to outline this, because again, these are just talking points. But how are you going to document your price strategy in your business plan or communicate that with somebody? And the answer to that question is going to be based on your industry. However price is established in your industry, you want to narrowly describe how you're going to use that approach to pricing in your business plan, or to be aware of it. And the more you're aware of it, the more you're going to have market street sense in terms of negotiating power to know the parameters of what your price, how low you can go, and how and the limits by if you go over, then you're going out of your bounds. We're almost done. I want to talk a little bit about your industry. Your industry. For your industry, need to know your financial averages. So for your industry, you really need to know your financial averages. And the first one is your average number of employees. Every business is different. Like in the jewelry manufacturing industry, the average number of employees per production unit is 9 employees. That's because I think it's 9 or 12, but after that, it's kind of hard to have personal relationships with everybody, so that gold and platinum dust just doesn't start to disappear. So it's a lot lower than you anticipate. So every industry has average number of employees. You need to know it. Every industry has every company has average revenue ranges too. Are you way under? Are you over? Yay. But so you need to know what are the average revenues that a business in your industry makes per year. We also have to talk about know what our average amount of cash in the bank is. So if we have less than that, then we probably don't have an adequate enough working capital to deal with the ups and downs of the cycles in the market and handle surprises and things of that sort. So that gives you an idea of how much cash you want to have on hand. And then next is our average accounts receivable. How much debt can we carry? And we don't want to carry too much. If we get out of that, then we could be, cruising for a bruising. So we need to know those averages. We also need to know the average debt. How much money's on long-term debt, short-term credit cards, and things of that sort. We also want to know our average profit margins, and our average inventory, and our average financial ratios, which there could be many. Knowing all these averages is going to give us much insight in terms of how we establish price and what our price should be to be within the norms of our industry. Again, we can get a lot of this information through Standard & Poor's Dun & Bradstreet's, First Research, and Hoover's. These are very all prestigious financial organizations, research organizations. Know that your bank, if you go to your business banker, banks often subscribe to these, and they can get this information to you for free. I know for a fact, like First Research charges like a $2,000 annual license fee to access their material. So if you're not, the main people who buy their material are banking organizations, so they can assess, applications for business loans, review business plans, and things of that sort. From an academic side, if you're a student here at UCLA Extension, you're able to access the Anderson's Business School Library with proper student ID. Also, you can access this from the downtown Los Angeles Business Library, which is a fabulous library, beautiful, very Art Deco, just a gorgeous place. They have the full library of Standard & Poor's monograms, as well as Dun & Bradstreet, and they will go over all these industry averages regarding price. So also be financially realistic. Know your market well and how your business performs within your market before you quit your day job. I just wanted to throw that out there. If you don't know the market, don't have experience, then you want to gain that before you put yourself in a situation where you're absolutely dependent on your business for survival. If this is not possible, then make sure that you are going into a business with much tested experience and market support. So you don't want to get surprised, caught off guard with, charging a price that's too high or too low. Go into a market slowly. Don't expand too quickly. Get it to the point where you really understand how customers respond to your advertising, your value proposition ladder, and the market cycles, product cycles, and all that stuff before you expose yourself to being in a very uncomfortable situation. So here's an example price strategy, and again, as I've shared in other videos, I'm in the process of launching at this particular time that these videos are being made, a business called, I'm writing a book called EQ Yoga, and I hope it perhaps will turn into a line of yoga studios that specialize in teaching emotional intelligence, the practice of emotional intelligence yoga. But anyway, so here's an example. EQ Yoga price strategy is to create a new wave of market demand by being the first yoga studio to integrate emotional intelligence to the practice of yoga. The second point of our price strategy, EQ Yoga Studios will charge the average prices charged by the national chain yoga studios and by local boutique yoga studios. $25 for a single class, $114 for 5 classes, $209 for 10 classes, etc. To make it easy for yoga practitioners to migrate from one yoga studio to the EQ Yoga Studios. So they're not shocked. It's the same basic price strategy, price points. Example price strategy 3, EQ Yoga will charge a flat rate for the Myers-Briggs type indicator and the EQI 2.0 emotional intelligence fee of $375 to administer and debrief its clients on their psychological type and their emotional intelligence results. So all customers coming into this business model, this organization, a part of the process of integration is taking and completing the Myers-Briggs type indicator and the strong inventory for a base fee of $375. EQ Yoga will charge hourly one-on-one consulting rate at $75 an hour, and for a lot of studios, they charge $100 an hour. So in terms of developing unique practices, yoga sequences for the problems they're trying to solve. If sales are down, EQ Yoga will closely monitor the price of other yoga studios and adjust its price accordingly to stay within the market equilibrium price. So that's saying part of our strategy to be very aware of what other studios are doing so that we're always competitive on price from that standpoint, not losing any customers. Remember, during the startup operations, know your overhead costs, your cost of goods or services sold, your break-even point, and minimum profit margins well enough so that you can make smart financial decisions at moment's notice. And then at the bottom in big red letters, see financial problems coming before they arrive. So this way, if you're anticipating financial problems before they arrive, you might be able to set up lines of credit or cut your expenses, but you certainly don't want to be caught off guard here. Okay, well, that concludes our talk on how to develop our price strategy. It's one of the 6 overall strategies, and it's the second strategy in our market development strategy, our market strategy. See you at our next video.